Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/malicious compliance. In today's episode, trying to kick me out of a class for wrongthink. Falsely accuse me of cheating? Well, I'll ruin the curve. Overtime. That's right, overtime. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Trying to kick me out of a class for wrongthink. Some of you liked my high school senior project story so much that I figured I'd give you another MC from my schooling days. As a disclaimer, I fully recognize that in this story, I was being a petty jackass. That said, I'm sure you'll understand. This is a more recent occurrence from college. I attended a 4-year school and wound up graduating with a BA in mass communications, but like all schools, I had to take general education courses as part of my graduation requirement. That much I was fine with. Although the selection was limited, we got to pick our poison, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world. One of the Gen Eds we had to do was humanities, and I chose a course titled Theory as Practice as my humanities class. This course was taken in addition to 5 other unrelated courses, which limited the free time I had on any day that wasn't a weekend. Bookmark this, because we're coming back to it soon. So theory as practice is whatever. It's a dumb, easy credit, *T course. Not a hard class by any stretch of the imagination. The basic premise was that we would take theological principles and apply them to the real world to see if they worked in practice. The only theological concept I actually remembered had to do with something called the Gestalt. Or some such nonsense. And you may be wondering why, in a course entirely about theology, I can only muster up one theological concept? Well, that's because, despite what I told you, it wasn't a theology class. Bear with me. The course began as a theology course, but halfway into the semester, we abruptly shifted gears, and the class turned into what amounts to postmodern art appreciation. This was a problem for me because I generally have one rule: when it comes to postmodern art, I don't appreciate it. Now, it started innocent enough, I suppose. We were told about some French dude named Pierre Douche*Bag who put a urinal in an art gallery and proclaimed it as art because of the idea it represented, not the effort or skill it took to create. This might be divisive, but I don't consider abstract concepts to be art, and during the class discussion, and in my class journal, I said as much. I didn't think this to be a big deal, as I was just saying that I don't think the theory operates well in practice, which was the whole essence of the course. My instructor disagreed. She asked me to stay behind in class one day, and told me that she was concerned about what I had written in my class journal about Mr. Douchebag's edgy deviant art level thinking, and that my opinion was wrong. In order to ensure I had the right opinion, she was mandating that I meet with her TA for a couple weeks after class hours. And that brings us back to my class load, with which I had very little free time. On a related note, want to know a fun fact about TAs? They're students too. They have class loads that limit their free time like anyone else. Amazing. Knowledge is power. I try to set up meetings with this guy, because I spent however much money on the course, so I might as well try passing it. The issue was that the guy would only meet during his office hours. With my schedule, that amounted to roughly once a week in a half-hour window, if I hauled *S across campus after my weight training course. Long story short, the TA was a flake 3 times, and I was in the infirmary for the 4th. Now, while all this was happening, class was going on, and I kept getting more and more passive-aggressive notes in my journal because I continued to have the wrong opinion about art gallery urinals. The instructor had reached her boiling point with me regarding the matter, and sent a letter to me saying that she was kicking me out of class for failing to make an effort and meet her flaky TA. To add insult to injury, she sent me this letter 3 weeks before the semester was over. Meaning that I spent a lot of time and money doing everything I was supposed to do, only to have her say LOL no and kick me out. I won't lie, I was a bit pissed, and may have called her more than a few unkind names to my roommate at the time. But after my venting session, I set up a meeting with the instructor and a mediator in the central office to discuss what should happen next. The meeting was mostly business, but in essence, I was told that in order to not get booted from the course, I had to envelop myself in the essence of the coursework and try to understand the theoretical principles we've gone over in class. Or, in normal person, agree with everything I say, kiss my ass, and learn to love art gallery urinals. Liberal arts school? So I agree and a mediator watches as we both sign a contract that details what we discussed. And I'm a man of my word, so I comply, and do exactly what I agreed to. As opposed to bringing up valid arguments regarding the course topics and starting meaningful discussions, I just go full brownnoser in my class journal. I mean, I start talking about how I'm having dreams about urinals, how I've learned to appreciate urinals, how I've started having erotic dreams about urinals, and how they relate to society's crumbing morality, etc. It was all very urinal focused. And it wasn't just limited to my journal. I went hard on every concept, and would literally ramble in class for several minutes, effectively filibustering the entire class, talking about society's moral decay that was depicted in the art we were observing, but I always made sure to bring it right on back to urinals. It got to the point where one of my classmates had a hard time keeping a straight face, as I would inevitably turn any topic back to the urinal. He would sometimes even set me up by bringing up Pierre Douchebag, from which point I would start ranting again, wasting everyone's time. About 2 days before the last week of class, I get told to stay after again, and my instructor informs me that she's not appreciating the tone I'm taking during discussions and in my journal. "What's the problem?" I asked. "You're obviously being sarcastic and acting as a disruption during discussions." "I'm just doing what you asked me to," I told her. "I asked you to take the course seriously, and you're not doing that." "That's not true," I argued. "You told me to envelop myself in the coursework, and to understand the undertones of what we're talking about." I genuinely believe that all these artists we're discussing are ripping off Duchamp's grand genius and repackaging it as some kind of false expression of creativity. She became angry. "No, you're being disruptive. Plain and simple. You know, I'm sure that people also thought Duchamp and his statement with the urinal were disruptive. She interrupted, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave and not come back. You're not taking any of this seriously." "No," I stated. "I followed every term we agreed upon in that contract both of us signed. You can't kick me out." "We'll see," she told me, before asking the people gathering at the door for her next class to enter. I left for my next class and was on pretty high alert for any letters I might be getting for the next few days. To my surprise, nothing came. However, I was certainly given less opportunity to speak during the subsequent courses as they turned less into class discussions about the reading, and more into lectures. I still wrote about urinals in my journal though. Finally, the last day of class arrives. It was basically us presenting our final projects to everyone, and I'm sure you can guess who and what I mentioned in my presentation. Unfortunately, there was a time limit, so I was brief. At the end of class, she gave a warm thank you to those of you who took this class seriously, while staring daggers at me. She then returned our journals, in which she told us she left heartfelt notes about our final entries and our time in class. Then she sent us on our way. What did my note say, you may be wondering? No clue. Threw that thing in the garbage the nanosecond it touched my hands. Told her thanks for the credit, never took a course from that crazy woman again, and made it my mission to tell anyone who would listen what kind of teacher she was. Falsely accuse me of cheating? Well, I'll ruin the curve. So, this was back in high school, 10th grade, honors chemistry. First day of class, the teacher spelled out the rules and some info. If you had an A going into the final exam, you did not have to take the final. The final was so tough, it was graded on a curve. 75% was the highest grade ever in 20 years. So, if highest grade was 75%, then everyone would get plus 25% added to their score. Also, if you were caught cheating, you received a 0% for that test, and got in trouble with the dean. Talking during a test was okay, as long as it was not sharing answers. Weird rule, I'll admit. No problem, I thought. I love chemistry, I'll have an A going into final, and I will not have to take the dreaded final. It did sound scary, after all. Trouble started with the first exam. I finished. It was not that hard, and I was bored waiting for class to end. Being an immature 15-year-old, I whispered to the person next to me, "Look at this." I showed him my calculator, old days, which had numbers 7734, which upside down looked like hell. I said that was this test was. A few days later, I got my test back, cheating 0%, please see me after class. Long story short, that hell joke was the reason. I took it to the spineless dean, who rescinded the 15 days of detention. I was allowed to talk, after all, but did not remove the 0%. The teacher even admitted at the disciplinary hearing that he knew I did not cheat. He said I had a 100% on that test, and no one else did, but 2F bad. Rules are rules. So, the rest of that semester I worked my A*S off, and a week before the final, it was clear I would still fall 1 or 2 percentage points below an A. I'd have to take the terrible final exam. All because of my immature stupidity, and that 0% for non-cheating. Now, I am all for rules, but I am also for common sense and fairness. Making me take the test was really about the teacher's ego, pride and saving face. He admitted as much. He was actually still pissed I did not get 15 days of detention for, by his admission, not cheating. I first talked to the principal. I offered to receive a B for the class and not take the final, because I knew it would help others with the better curve. I did not want an A with other students mad at me. Principal said too bad. Okay then. I then approached the teacher and said, look, you know I deserve an A. He nodded his head in agreement. If you make me take the final, I will get at least 95%, and I will kill the curve for everyone else. I was a bit cocky for sure, but I knew I could back it up. He said tough, and you won't get above 75%, Mr. Smarty Pants. No one ever has. Challenge accepted and malicious compliance initiated. I studied as usual, and I told everyone else that there was not going to be a curve for the final. And don't blame me for what is going to happen to your grades. I am being forced to take this test. Before the final exam, some of the students who had to take the final pleaded with the teacher. They had no doubt in my abilities as a curve wrecker, but he was one stubborn prick. No dice. I got a 98% on the final. Everyone got 2 points for the curve adjustments, which in the past would have been at least 25 points. Kids were pissed, parents were pissed, meetings full of shouting and swearing were held. Through it all I made sure no one was mad at me. After all, I told everyone this was going to happen before it happened. The rest of the year, the principal, dean and teacher were all pissed at me for my stunt HUH. They had to deal with a lot of irate parents, I guess. 15 years later, I found out the 75% max score held up every year before and after me, except of course for my year. So in the end about 100 innocent kids got penalized, so a teacher and administration could save face. I got my A and ended up class salutatorian. Overtime. That's right, overtime. Here's another tale that's not mine, but I love asking people about their best malicious compliance stories, and this is one my cousin told me. He worked at an injection molding company as a machine operator, and one of his colleagues was named Danny. He was a runner. He would show up early and start up the machines before day shift arrived. He would make sure that each machine had enough raw materials and boxes for the completed products, that sort of thing. He would pull the full skids of completed product and take them to the warehouse and wrap the skids for shipments. He'd load the trucks and accept the deliveries of raw materials. He knew everyone on the factory floor and was pretty much a pivot man for the operation. Let's call the company Canco, since it was located in Ontario, Canada. They got bought out by an American company, Amco, and Amco sent up a new guy to be facility manager. Before they got bought out in 2019, Canco was struggling. Danny was an arrive early / stay late kind of guy, so he offered to bank his overtime and Canco accepted. He got it in writing. At the end of 2019, he asked to be paid out for his accumulated overtime, which was substantial. In January 2020, the facility manager called him into the office and offered him a $6,000 annual bump in pay and increased benefits if he accepted a salaried position for 44 hours a week. Danny took it. As 2020 went on, Danny was working lots of hours and submitted an Excel sheet every week with the hours he'd actually worked. There was a column that showed hours in excess where he entered the hours in excess of 44 for the week. In the autumn of 2020, Danny approached the facility manager and asked if he wanted Danny to take his accumulated overtime as time off, or to be paid out. The Amco company handbook stated that all PTO needed to be used up by the end of the year, or it would be lost. The facility manager chuckled and replied, "Your salary. You don't get overtime. That's why I put you on salary." "That's not right, boss. I get overtime after 44 hours. "No, you don't. That's Amco company policy." "Yes, I do. That's Ontario labor law." Danny handed him a printout of the relevant page from the Ontario government website. The facility manager said he would look into it, but didn't. Danny pestered him, and finally, fed up, he fired off an email to the facility manager, the plant manager, Kanko HR, and Amco HR as well. Eventually he got called into a meeting with the plant manager, the facility manager, and HR. You should understand that HR was a bit of a Karen, nobody really liked her, but she was a blabbermouth. The company tried everything to get out of paying the overtime. Danny asked, "Do I have the authority to enter into contracts on behalf of the company?" "No." "Do I have the authority to assign work to my colleagues, or discipline them?" "No." "Then I am not a manager or a supervisor, and under Ontario labor law these are the only people exempt from overtime." "Oh, and see that total? You can multiply that by 1.5, so for every hour overtime I worked, you either pay me an hour and a half, or give me an hour and a half off with pay." After the meeting, the facility manager was furious. His little scheme to get free work out of Danny didn't play, and now he looked really bad in front of his boss. "Danny, beginning right now, you don't work another minute of overtime without my permission, you got that?" "Okay," Danny replied. "Let me put that in an email." He did, and the FM confirmed it in a reply. Danny was arriving at 5:30 a.m., more than an hour ahead of the production team, in order to unlock the doors, turn on the lights, and warm up the machines. These machines melt little beads of plastic and squirt them into molds, so they take about 45 minutes to an hour to warm up. So the next day, at 2:30, Danny left, and shut off his phone. There was an afternoon shift that started at 3 p.m., and a meeting with the day shift foreman, the afternoon shift foreman, the FM and Danny, and there was a discussion of any issues and production targets for the shift. Since Danny wasn't there, and he had the tally sheets, the afternoon shift had no idea what they were expected to produce for the shift. The next day, Danny came in early as usual, and when the FM arrived, he demanded to know why Danny didn't attend the meeting. Danny explained that his shift was over, and he went home since he wasn't allowed overtime. That's why he shut off his phone, too. He can't do company work on his off hours, that's overtime. The FM said that Danny's attendance at the meeting was mandatory, so Danny suggested that the only way for that to happen would be to adjust his working hours. The FM then changed his hours to 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., effective immediately, and put it in an email, at Danny's insistence. Later that day, there was a delivery that arrived at 3 p.m., and Danny wasn't there to unload it, so they had to turn it away and have them return in the morning. The next day, Danny arrives at 8 a.m., as instructed, only to be met by a furious day shift foreman. When the foreman arrived, the entire production staff was in the parking lot as the doors were locked. He opened up, let them in, and then had to wait around for almost an hour, producing nothing, as the heating coils on the machines came up to temperature. The FM arrived in the middle of this bull locking, and Danny simply pointed at him and said, "He changed my hours to an 8 a.m. start, didn't he tell you?" This turned the wrath onto the FM, who now had to take responsibility for a 12 to 15% drop in production for the day. There were also occasional Saturdays when the company fell behind, only Danny wouldn't be there to bring the machines raw materials, or take away finished product. That would turn into a clusterfuck too. So the FM gave in, and gave Danny blanket authorization to work any overtime required. The raise he got to bump his salary ended up boosting his pay by $2.75 per hour, but the only downside was that Danny couldn't bank it, it was paid out each check. The kicker? Remember Karen, the blabbermouth from HR? Somehow, and nobody knows exactly how, word got around the office that anyone who wasn't a manager was entitled to OT, and they all started submitting timesheets that included it. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.